Hey, everybody. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I didn't know if you were talking to the audience rhetorically or to us, Crystal.
It could be either. Both. All of the above. You know, welcoming people in. Yes. I got us in trouble last Friday, so I'm going to try to be more demure this week.
We're tightening it up. We've got makeup on. We're hair makeup ready.
That's
yes.
Right.
Yes.
We're gonna
that was
calm
the real
down.
bummer.
Yeah, we're gonna calm down and how we objectify our nation's assassins.
Our nation's
And Ryan
assassins.
combed his hair.
I did.
He found
Looking
a
good.
comb, so.
Looking good, guys. There was a bunch of reaction last night on the late night shows to the firing of, or indefinite suspension of Jimmy Kimmel. I guess it's not clear that he's canceled for good. So wanted to get into some of that. We got some new Trump comments. We've got updates with regard to Israel, Netanyahu directly denying that he had anything to do with Charlie Kirk's death, and some new information brought to light by Candace Owens, a new picture that she released that is allegedly of Tyler Robinson hours after the killing occurred, and he's still sort of like hanging around in the area at a Dairy Queen. I don't know. We'll probably get to that in the premium section.
Yeah. Really interesting. Obviously, really interesting story.
Yeah, for sure. And shows him wearing like a combination of the outfits that he'd worn previously in the photos that we've seen. And it's just, I mean, whether or not the photo is real or not, I think is a question in of itself. Some people speculate it could be AI. We don't have a timestamp, all of those sorts of things. But anyway, we'll bring you all of the latest with regard to that investigation.
Yep, another fast food killer, apparently, just like Luigi with the McDonald's. So let's start with Trump's comments here about Jimmy Kimmel. Why don't we?
Your Vice President, Vance, said that free speech is under attack in the UK. Do you agree with him? And Prime Minister, we saw dismissal of a very well-known chat show host in America last night, Mr. Kimmel. Is free speech more under attack in Britain or America?
Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else. And he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent.
Lack of talent.
Ryan and
what do
Emily,
we make of this?
Yeah, we haven't gotten you guys' take, at least on the air, with regard to the indefinite suspension of Kimmel. So, Emily, what did you make of all of these developments before I get to the president's specific comments there?
I probably am in the position of like disagreeing with. I'll probably be the one like odd man out throughout this conversation, because I think with Kimmel, the timing is obviously an appearance of conflict of interest, and an appearance of conflict of interest is a conflict of interest. But also my position is that the FCC either should not exist, or this particular power of the FCC certainly should not exist. I actually asked Brendan Carr about that a couple of months ago, about whether the law itself actually needed to be changed. And he said at the time, actually, that's probably a conversation that needs to be entertained, whether the FCC should have any jurisdiction to determine what, quote, public interest is, because as long as that exists, if you're a Trump Republican and you see the FCC with this power, and you see corporate media going against you for so long, or going against it being like fairly obviously biased in one direction for so long, then the tool gets more and more tempting to use. And the last thing on that point that I'll say is, I would not have a problem with the Democratic FCC commissioner if you see NBC News or wherever lying our way into another Iraq war, saying we could do this the easy way or the hard way. This is not in the public interest that you are making up intelligence, whatever. I would never support them yanking a broadcast license. I don't think the jawboning is that like significant. I do think that the merger question is absolutely significant. The Nexstar merger question is absolutely significant. But my basic point on this is that I think the corporations are opportunistically taking these dust ups as their opportunities. The market was catching up with Kimmel. The market was catching up with Colbert. Colbert wasn't turning a profit. I would be shocked if Kimmel wasn't losing a decent amount of money. And when these things come up, it becomes an opportunity for the networks to be like, hey, we're doing you a favor, Trump. Look what we're doing here. So that's kind of my take overall, but I'm sure we'll have other disagreements.
What do you think, Ryan?
I disagree with basically all of that. I don't think we have any way of knowing whether or not Colbert or any of these people are profitable. You see this claim made that they're profitable or unprofitable. The way the broadcast networks work is not that they make a certain amount of candy and it costs this much to make the candy, and then they sell the candy for a higher price and then they have a margin there. It's not like there's so much more to that, and they're part of a giant brand, and which involves their connection to their bigger conglomerates and the cable revenue that they get, and the broadcast revenue through the ads that they get. And if they have even just 500,000 people who are huge fans of Kimmel, like that can actually make it worth it to have the Kimmel. So there's this. We're too quick to say that actually these are business decisions they wanted to make, but they were afraid to make, which that I don't understand either.
And the last thing on that point that I'll say is interest, and an appearance of conflict of interest is a conflict of interest. But also my position is that the FCC either should not exist, or this particular power of the FCC certainly should not exist. I actually asked Brendan Carr about that a couple of months ago, about whether the law itself actually needed to be changed, and he said at the time, actually, that's probably a conversation that needs to be entertained, whether the FCC should have any jurisdiction to determine what, quote, public interest is, because as long as that exists, if you're a Trump Republican and you see the FCC with this power and you see corporate media going against you for so long, going against it being like fairly obviously biased in one direction for so long, then the tool gets more and more tempting to use. And the last thing on that point that I'll say is I would not have a problem with the Democratic FCC commissioner if you see NBC News or wherever lying our way into another Iraq war, saying we could do this the easy way or the hard way. This is not in the public interest that you are making up intelligence, whatever. I would never support them yanking a broadcast license. I don't think the jawboning is that significant. I do think that the merger question is absolutely significant. The Nexstar merger question is absolutely significant. But my basic point on this is that I think the corporations are opportunistically taking these dust ups as their opportunities. The market was catching up with Kimmel. The market was catching up with Colbert. Colbert wasn't turning a profit. I would be shocked if Kimmel wasn't losing a decent amount of money. And when these things come up, it becomes an opportunity for the networks to be like, hey, we're doing you a favor, Trump. Look what we're doing here. So that's kind of my take overall, but I'm sure we'll have other disagreements.
What do you think, Ryan?
I disagree with basically all of that. I don't think we have any way of knowing whether or not Colbert or any of these people are profitable. You see this claim made that they're profitable or unprofitable. The way the broadcast networks work is not that they make a certain amount of candy and it costs this much to make the candy, and then they sell the candy for a higher price and then they have a margin there. It's not like there's so much more to that, and they're part of a giant brand, and which involves their connection to their bigger conglomerates and the cable revenue that they get and the broadcast revenue through the ads that they get. And if they have even just 500,000 people who are huge fans of Kimmel, like that can actually make it worth it to have the Kimmel. So there's this. We're too quick to say that actually these are business decisions they wanted to make, but they were afraid to make, which that I don't understand either. Companies are usually fine to fire, to make business decisions that they think are in their own interest. They don't need the government to push them. But I think the bigger disagreement is on the problem with the jawboning. I think jawboning by the government especially when it is directly connected to an explicit threat. Brennan Carr of the FCC told ABC, you need to take action against Jimmy Kimmel or else. That is a explicit threat of government action unless they take action. In Missouri versus, the Biden or whatever the case was, where you didn't even have any threat. What you had was members of the government, both Trump administration's DHS and then Biden administration's DHS, going to the platforms and flagging, I don't like this post here about the vaccine, or I don't like this about the lab. And the platforms are actually like, for the most part, they're like, all right, we're taking that down. The reason it was a problem is not because the government said, take this down or else. The fact that they're the government means that they come with awesome power, enormous power that has to be kept in check.
The or else is implicit.
The or else is just implied. It's much worse when you straight up say or else. Like, that's just gangster stuff. But the awesome power of the federal government needs to be checked by the Constitution. And that's why the FBI cannot even walk in the door and tell you anything about your monologue, or else you understand that to be an implicit threat. Big fat beefy Italian guy comes in.
It's like when Taibbi got a knock
like
from the
shop,
IRS on his door after the Twitter files.
Right, yeah. Hey, he's just knocking on the door here. Just want to make sure that all your paperwork is in order. Like, they didn't even have to say, back off of the Twitter files or else you will get audited. That would be horrifying if they said, back off the Twitter files or else you will get audited. How is this any different? Also, the entire center-left thought that the framing of the Twitter files was misinformation and was poorly constructed and was cherry-picked. So should the FCC or the IRS or the FBI have said, you know what, we didn't like the framing of the way the Twitter files came out. We thought this was wrong. So now you're going to suffer. You're going to get punished. It's the exact same thing, because the conservative argument is that what Kimmel said was misinformation and therefore the threats are justified. In fact, if you look at exactly what he said, he said MAGA folks are desperately trying to find ways to make it so that this is not one of their guys. Now, to me, it turned out it was not one of their guys. He said this on Monday night. It was the case that everybody from every direction was trying to make the case that this was not one of their guys. That's just what that's what they were doing. So then come in and say, you have to take action against this guy or else. And then the or else is the dual murders. There's murders at the Disney level that are needed, and then Nexstar wants to Nexstar is the biggest, which bought Rising. Nexstar is the biggest owner of local television networks, which is trying to buy even more local television networks, which we have said for decades is consolidation that we don't want to see. So they need the law changed, basically. They need an FCC rule changed so that they can buy more local television channels, and which are so lucrative. Why? Because of super PAC and political ads. Like, that's the main revenue source. That's the only reason local television channels are so lucrative. And Nexstar, as we know, because Emily and I worked for them for like 5 minutes, they're a Trump aligned
freelance.
We met their leadership. They're Trump aligned, and so then they operated on the same team and helped effectuate this entire thing.
And they also, by the way, Brendan Carr in his comments, directly name-checked, like, hey, these, cable affiliate owners, they need to be looking into this. So he says that and threatens ABC. Next thing, Nexstar says, okay, no problem. We're going to preempt Kimmel. And then, and according to the Rolling Stone reporting, the executives who'd been meeting and who'd been like, shitting themselves over this, they did not think what Kimmel said was over the line, I think what Kimmel said ended up being obviously incorrect, but it was not like that crazy or wild or insanely out of bounds thing to say. In any case, the executives didn't have a real problem with what he said, but they explicitly felt that the pressure from the Trump administration was the reason why they had to act. And then, on top of all of that, if you had any doubt in mind, then you have Brennan Carr go out and say, hey, maybe The View should be next. You have Trump come out and say effectively, you shouldn't be allowed to criticize me or else your license should be revoked. So if there was any doubt whatsoever about the reasoning for the decision-making of the ABC and Disney executive team, it should all be put to bed by the chain of events, their own internal deliberations, and then the government basically going out and bragging about the power that they wield and their ability to coerce news executives to do whatever the hell they want.
Griffin, we should get you in on this because comedy's your space. One thing to that point, I wonder how, because the Wall Street Journal was reporting after it happened that they expect Kimmel to be back in a couple of days, and I actually am curious if he will be back by Monday. I don't know. I agree with one thing Crystal said on the nature of the one-liner. By Kimmel standards, was relatively mild. He said some during COVID. He said some crazy stuff. He's been out there. And my thing with Kimmel, I don't know what you guys think. It's sort of like my thing with Colbert as a big Griffin. We've talked about this Strangers with Candy era Colbert fan. It just feels like a lot of it feels lazy. But anyway, that's beside the point.
And one other point, I think what people were really upset about, and then Griffin, who's, if you're in comedy, that means you're an outlaw at this point because comedy is illegal once again.
Outlaw.
So there was two pieces of the joke. The first part's not even a joke. It's like MAGA's trying to score political points on this and say that it's not their guy. I don't even actually see how that's funny. It's just a comment. But the joke was the next one, which is let's see how Trump is responding. And then Trump gets asked, sir, how are you holding up personally after the loss of your friend? And Trump responds, great. We're building this. I don't know if we have it handy, but we're building this ballroom. Everybody said we couldn't build the ballroom. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. It's going to be the greatest ballroom in the history of ballrooms. And, it goes on and on and on about the ballroom. That's it. And so that was his joke. He's like, look at this guy. What a cretin. That was the joke. And I think that's what Trump was actually offended about. But Trump should have not acted like a cretin if he didn't want Jimmy Kimmel to portray him as one.
Well, and Trump made it pretty plain that that's what he was upset about, since he then went on to say, you're not allowed to criticize me, you know?
Right.
Yeah,
Trump has been... Go, Griffin.
Go ahead, Griff.
If we're to analyze this from a comedy perspective, then Kimmel's guilty and should be fired. But we shouldn't analyze it from a comedy perspective because that's not right. I did have a few questions for Emily. I am curious about this idea that the FCC should be eliminated or what have you. I'm curious about that and what that would mean if it's gone. But also to the point about money, to slightly steelman Emily's case about views, I did read last night that Jimmy Kimmel was averaging in the key demo around 129,000 views, which is about one YouTube clip from us. This clip today will probably do more.
Is that real? He's averaging that in the demo?
And that's actually down 50% from what it was a couple months ago. So there seems to be a steady decline there. But if this were just purely, if Nexstar were to try to make this look like purely a financial decision, we're just bleeding money on the show, why wouldn't they just make an announcement being hey, we're going to slowly fold this show down at the end of the year, as opposed to this super knee-jerk reaction
Disney, you mean?
From the administration. And why would, Disney, why wouldn't they do similar what they did with Colbert, right? Where they're slow rolling it out, but this knee-jerk reaction to it seems to be implicitly a direction from the government.
Well, I think because they're trying to please, I think they're being opportunistic. My honest opinion is that I think they're trying to, exactly what you say. Trump operates like a Roy Cohn trained mafioso. So I think they take these sort of dust-ups as opportunities to be like, look, we're giving you a little here, like we're cooperating. We love Trump, maybe is what they're saying behind the scenes. I don't know if you guys caught Sherry Redstone, obviously coming out and saying that this is business. There were a bunch of anonymous sources who went to Puck and then I think the New York Post during the Colbert dust-up that said it was losing around $40 million last year. I don't know. I mean, like when you have a few anonymous sources, it's hard to obviously verify that number without the network going on the record. Those are catastrophically bad numbers for Kimball. Some of this is anyway. That is, we don't have to get into the market of late night shows. Just to say that I think the networks take these opportunities
I'll grant you
to be like, hey, look, we're working with you.
Yeah, I will grant you the show is a dud and probably is losing money, but it's just hard to disentangle it from the entire network.
Well, and I just looked it up. So the numbers I'm seeing, Kimmel was averaging 220,000 viewers in the demo, which is still not great. It's a little better than 100
a couple
whatever.
months ago. A couple months ago, it was what I read.
Okay, well, he was ahead of Colbert and Fallon in terms of his numbers. So, in terms, if you look at the genre, he was actually the person who was performing the best.
That makes sense.
I mean, I obviously agree with Ryan, like the business thing may be true that it's losing money, but that is not the reason he was suspended right now. Because in fact, I think by doing it in this way, they have put themselves in a much worse position because people are very upset that they made this decision and they have the possibility of strikes from talent. And, obviously this is a giant conglomerate. There's all sorts of ways that talent and producers and actors and whatever can speak out and be upset. It's created this whole national cultural moment. Like, I don't think as a business this would have been the way that they would have wanted to go. Instead, they could have done what, for example, like MSNBC did at the beginning of the Trump administration, when they look around and see the writing on the wall and they basically offer up Joy Reid as tribute. They're like, okay, well, you don't even have to say anything. We're going to get rid of this lady and we're going to sell off MSNBC. Are we good now? That in that way, there isn't that direct, like, you're directly threatened and under duress. You intentionally, like, cave and capitulate in a way that is undeniable and blatantly obvious.
And also the reason why these shows, these late night shows, like in general, big picture suck is because they are sycophantic to the Democratic Party. And now the Republicans are asking for them to be sycophantic to the Republican Party. And like to a certain extent, comedy is supposed to be illegal. It's supposed to feel illegal. It's supposed to feel like, oh, you're not allowed to say that, but the comedian is saying that. And that's why it sucks right now when they just, jerk off the Democratic Party, and it's going to suck when they jerk off the Republican Party. And so it's like the fundamental like identity and core of comedy is going to continue sucking if it's about making comedy feel legal, like things that you're allowed to say, which is the antithesis of the form.
Get rid of the FCC, baby.
Yeah.
That's kind of an interesting comment, though, Griffin, because what Trump is doing accidentally is making them, like, edgy and subversive.
Yes, exactly. He's bringing it back.
You can't do, you're just like standard lib thing is now illegal. So he's making it so, because we all watched, I mean, I watched a bunch of the monologues from last night, which were not, like, particularly spectacular. But now they have this looming interest and, in
Okay, this entire segment that they're going on is actually really funny. Breaking Points is like a YouTube only news show, and they're basically like coping on behalf of late night hosts for some reason, by sort of like pushing this line that Jimmy Kimmel is edgy by being retarded. I don't know. Like I think he was basically just pushing like already debunked information about the Charlie Kirk shooter or whatever. But as an online news show, they're basically sweeping on behalf of like what they acknowledge as Democrat Party aligned late night hosts to get people to like go watch them again. When that should literally be like the last thing that they want to do as a like YouTube only platform news show. Really funny. What are they thinking? I guess they're not thinking. I guess they're kind. This is like what it means to be blinded by TDS.
Increased interest and scrutiny and edge to them simply because of what the Trump administration has done here.
The base liberal returns. I'm seeing Keith Olbermann firing off some crazy tweets again. It's all happening.
Oh yeah.
So we've got new comments here from Trump on the Air Force One about sort of his larger plans or thoughts on TV networks in general. Let's take a listen from him on Air Force One for a second.
That's something that should be talked about for licensing too. When you have a network and you have evening shows and all they do is hit Trump. That's all they do. If you go back, I guess they haven't had a conservative on in years or something, somebody said. But when you go back and you take a look, all they do is hit Trump. They're licensed. They're not allowed to do that. They're an arm of the Democrat Party. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Fly safely. You know why I say that? Because I'm on the flight. I want to get home. Otherwise, I wouldn't care.
He's on the flight, or otherwise he wouldn't care.
That would be a good
His
joke,
comedy is
except
legal.
we know he's on the flight because he's standing right there, and so he stepped on his own punchline with his own presence. Otherwise, that's pretty funny.
He also keeps saying from his first post to just that, like, he's absolutely convinced that Kimmel has been fired, and that is not what any of the reporting suggests right now, and it wasn't what any of the reporting suggests when he fired off his True Social at 1:30 in the morning UK time. So I don't know if he knows something or if he's trying to manifest. But
maybe they should just bring him back and not announce it. And
you know what would
Trump
actually solve?
Trump would never notice.
He might not ever know. And what might solve the entire problem is if they give Trump Kimmel's late night spot and then Trump isn't president anymore.
Everybody wins.
He would love that job.
Yeah, but couldn't he do a 5-minute monologue? Or is it just the whole show just going to be his monologue?
I see. Like, could he contain himself to 5
Although,
minutes?
sometimes, if he was not president, I would watch that. I would make that deal.
Remember that time on the campaign trail, they just stood in silence and swayed to Ave Maria or something like that?
That was great. That was great stuff. That was amazing content.
Some real surrealist content. I don't know what you call that, but I do want to focus in on what he said there, which he specifically said, they hit Trump every night. That's not allowed. It's like, literally in America, you are allowed to criticize the president of the United States. That's kind of the whole deal here. That's a big part of what we're all about. And as I said before, makes it plain, not only that the real problem he had wasn't, something he said about Charlie Kirk's killer, it was about the criticism of him, which is why he had previously said, hey, Jimmy Kimmel's next. Had been calling for his ouster, and also why you've now got, Brendan, and he said, who did he say is next, Jimmy Fallon or Stephen Colbert?
And Seth Meyer.
Yeah. And then you have Brendan Carr coming after The View, and putting them in the spotlight. And The View, notably, and this is pretty shameful, they didn't talk about this topic yesterday on their show at all. So, and that's the point. The point isn't just to get a scalp in terms of Jimmy Kimmel. The point is to send the message out to everyone that you better watch it. You better be careful, because you step over wherever that invisible line is, you get a little bit of a, online conservative backlash going, and that's it. Your companies, your corporate executives, they're not going to have your back. They are not going to have your back. You are on your own. And that message, whether or not Kimmel comes back at some point or doesn't come back, whatever, that message has been sent. And the fact that The View said nothing about this yesterday, I think shows you the chill that has already been instilled, at least in many journalists, personalities, comedians across the board.
Speaking of comedians across the board, we'll go for it, Emily, while I pull this clip up. I do have a Colbert clip I want to pull up next.
I was going to say,
Okay,
if I were Democrats right now, I would immediately be looking at ways to defang the FCC and force Republicans to defend the power of the FCC, because the FCC gives what's called news exemptions. Howard Stern, for example, got his quote news exemption. So this is it goes back years and years, and it's been used in ways that we've become accustomed to, because like many things, before we had this crazy moment 10 plus years ago, I guess now, in the US, we didn't think about the tools, or we hadn't thought about the tools in this way for 20, 30 years. And now Republicans, having watched the media, especially with Trump, but going back over the last 30 years, the way that conservatives were covered, are saying, well, hey, there's this public interest tool in the FCC's toolkit. And that's there. So while all of these levers are being pulled, why not take a look at the public interest part of it? Why not say, why not take away the quote news exemption from some of these broadcasters and make it so that they do have to do equal time? Because what Trump said there, where he was like, it's not allowed to just bash Trump night after night. If they have their news exemption, maybe the FCC takes that away and then says, actually, it's not allowed. You have to do equal time and all of that, which, as a business model, doesn't really even make sense anymore. So if I were Democrats, I would make Republicans start defending the New Deal FCC, because that would get... I honestly think there's a pretty good case for abolishing the FCC, the way that we license broadcast airwaves and all of that. But anyway, beside the point.
Well, Gutfeld needs equal time. Get me on there, Gutfeld.
That doesn't count because it's cable, but the broadcast.
Oh, okay.
Networks.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But
which most people I don't think distinguish a difference between. The average person just views this as just a freedom of speech thing without the intricacies of that's broadcast, this is cable, right.
The problem there is that this isn't really on the up and up. It's not as if they have a genuine concern about public interest and they're going to use the remedies existing around the public interest rule. What they're saying is, we don't like what you said, and we're going to connect it to this other thing, this merger that you want, that your parent company wants. And we're going to use the threat of blocking this merger, not because we think it's anti-competitive, not because we don't like the merger on the merits, but as power to get you to do what we want. So looking at the rules implies that this is being done on the up and up through the rule book, and it's not. It's just being done with raw power.
So many people are saying, well, what are Jimmy Kimmel's colleagues going to say? What is Jon Stewart? What is John Oliver going to say? So we've got a clip here from Stephen Colbert that we'd like to play here. See if it met the moment.
I'm your host, Stephen Colbert. But tonight, we are all Jimmy Kimmel. I still have a show, though, right? Okay, good. Yesterday, after threats from Trump's FCC chair, ABC yanked Kimmel off the air indefinitely. That is blatant censorship, and it always starts small. Remember in week 1 of his presidency, Gulf of America. Call it Gulf of America. Sure, seems harmless, but with an autocrat, you cannot give an inch. And if ABC thinks that this is going to satisfy the regime, they are woefully naive. And clearly, they've never read the children's book, If You Give a Mouse a Kimmel. and to Jimmy, just let me say, I stand with you and your staff 100%. And also, you couldn't let me enjoy this for 1 week.
All right. If you give a mouse a Kimmel, Ryan loved that one. That's
good stuff. I
appreciate
it. That dad joke landed hard.
Yes, there's the key demo, folks. There's the key demo.
Gen X and
up. I think I am in the demo now. I need to start watching these late night shows.
So did you guys watch these late night reactions? Do we find that this met the moment? Because I was struck by these feeling very similar to other just Trump takedowns in terms of tone and energy. What did you guys make of it?
So I think what they were lacking, on the one hand, I'm sympathetic because it's hard to make comedy about something that, like to have a topic and be like, I'm going to make a joke about this. And yet their mandate on the show, obviously, is not just to do political commentary, but to make it funny. And it's a difficult thing to be able to nail. Sympathetic there. It's certainly not something I could pull off. I think what they were all lacking is some sort of a call to action. It's like, okay, you don't like it. And you're saying, oh, this won't affect my performance. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I mean, I don't even think, like, as an individual human being, you're not even really fully equipped to assess your own ability to withstand that pressure because you don't know the way things are subtly influencing you, if that makes sense, which is why you have to, why we've worked hard to insulate ourselves from different pressures that are we can anticipate. But there was no like, okay, that's why we need to boycott. That's why we're going on strike. That's why, that's why Democrats need to break up these giant conglomerates. Like, maybe it's too much to put that on them, but I think people are looking at them for like some sort of leadership since this is their industry and these are really influential, powerful, wealthy people at this point. And there was none of that. It's just sort of like, Republicans are hypocrites. Okay, we can see that. We're not happy about what happened with Kimmel. That's obvious. And I think the other thing that's always difficult with Trump is because we've had... This is far from the first threat to the First Amendment from this administration, even literally in this week. So when you've talked about these things before, it also becomes difficult to separate from previous concerns from this moment and to really sort of like put a pin in what makes this particular action different, more extraordinary, more troubling, darker, more sinister than previous things that we've thought about and talked about with Trump.
Yeah, Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert are really awful free speech martyrs for like the left in these cases because they're at heart corporate Dems who have coasted on really lazy comedy and started driving some of these formats like into the ground unnecessarily so. And it's like I think it's hard for people like rally around these guys.
I agree, Emily, and like
company men.
I agree, Emily, because also it's like liberals have a lot of times turned a blind eye to other freedom of speech issues over the last 2 years. I mean, like, have they covered the crackdowns from both Biden and Trump on Palestine protests, freedom of speech? Like, I see so many people in LA.
Have Colbert and Kimmel talked about that? That's a really good point.
I mean, maybe they've
has.
Stewart has for sure, but I don't know. I am a little struck by like a lot of liberals that I see online coming out for the first time about freedom of speech after 2 years of disastrous freedom of speech. But it's like, when it's like a multimillionaire like white host of a late night show, that's when it matters. Obviously, he's a more famous person. It's going to make a bigger impact. But yeah, if you haven't been talking about freedom of speech in a lot of other areas, and let's say a lot of these were front page news stories. You'd be like, to miss Mahmoud Khalil, that's a front page story. Like, that's not like, sorry, I didn't turn to the third page to see that.
Let me defend not, Colbert and these people who I haven't watched. I genuinely don't know. I don't suspect that they said anything about that, but I don't actually know for sure. But let me defend the libs a little bit here, which is to say, number one, Democrats overwhelmingly, oppose what's happening in Gaza, have opposed the crackdown on speech on campus. Like, that movement comes from the left, and, it's more leftist, but also left liberal. So there's that. The other thing I would say is, again, like, I was and Ryan was at odds with a lot of liberals in terms of their, ignoring and acceptance and pushing actively cancel culture and trampling on free speech and censorship and all of that, right?
Yes.
So I wasn't on the same page with them there. However, I will say both in terms of the substance and in terms of the state mechanisms, this is different, right? Like, with the Twitter file stuff, what the Biden administration was messaging to, these social media companies about was COVID misinformation that they felt like genuinely was going to cause people to lose their lives, right? So now we all felt like, okay, first of all, a lot of these accounts are tiny accounts. Like, it's not going to make that big of a difference. You guys have been wrong about a bunch of stuff with COVID. We don't want a ministry of truth. Just by sending these messages and having these meetings, you're exerting extraordinary pressure. But I don't want to pretend like the COVID misinformation and this like lame comment from Jimmy Kimmel are remotely the same, because they're not, right? So the content is different. And then, as Ryan was laying out before, the government action is different as well. So here you have an explicit threat, and it comes in the context of a Trump administration that has used every opportunity, real and imagined crises, to crush dissent, crack down, grab power, and has truly, that truly is an authoritarian threat to the country and to democracy. So even as I, again, was not on the same page with liberals, you can go back and look at my support of the Harper's letter and coverage of the Twitter files and all that stuff.
Yeah, you guys took a lot of heat. We did,
yeah. Even though I wasn't on their side there, I think it is fair to say this administration, what they're doing now is genuinely different than anything we saw under the Biden administration. I don't think it even came close. And that's before we even talk about scrubbing people's social media and for whether or not they can have a visa and deporting them without due process and, the massive crackdown over speech on Palestine, et cetera. So that's what I would say in defense of the libs.
I think you always have to take what Trump is saying, even if he doesn't mean it literally, you have to take it seriously, because when you have the President of the United States threatening broadcast licenses and even if it's just, quote, jawboning, I think you do have to take it seriously, especially when it comes with threats from the FCC and when you see compliance. So I actually think the way that Trump talks about broadcast licenses is insane.
And when they have a track record of weaponizing the government to punish universities, law firms, immigrants, students, anyone that they don't like, when he's coming out and issuing a statement saying, hey, we're going to make Antifa, which is an ideology, a terrorist organization, and threatening people who are just pro-Palestine with providing material support to terrorism, that's the record of this administration. So it's not an idle threat. We all know that they have weaponized the entire federal government in every way that they can think of in order to coerce and crush dissent and consolidate power. So that is a very different landscape than what we've dealt with before.
The other thing I was going to say is I do think some moves from Dems and the Biden administration, and this doesn't have to become a tit-for-tat thing, I do think things like the Global Engagement Center, which it's hypocritical for Marco Rubio to shut it down and act like he's a champion of free speech, obviously, given what's happened with visas and other students. But in that case, the State Department was funding blacklists of conservative media outlets, and not even just conservative media outlets, but literally Unheard found its way onto a global disinformation index that was funded by the State Department. The Equality Act, which almost every Democrat supports, would have serious ramifications for free speech because of the way that it reads gender identity into sex. And the same thing was true of the way the Obama administrations and the Biden administrations wielded Title IX. So it's some of that stuff I think was enormously significant in ways that it's frustrating, because the Colbert, who's now a free speech martyr, and Kimmel is a free speech martyr, don't give a damn about, they don't care, and some of the people who are supporting them don't care and never did. The media barely covered the Global Engagement Center story like it wasn't really anything, and there are other examples that we could point to. I actually agree, I don't think the COVID one is apples to apples. I think it's apples to oranges, but I do think there were other ones where we saw both the Obama and Biden administrations weaponizing their power to go after journalists, and or not just journalists, but to go after speech. Actually, Ryan, the James Risen case from the Obama administration and the James Rosen case from the Obama administration are examples of that too. But in those cases, most of the media was pretty defensive of Risen, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, and Risen started late Bush and then went into Obama, and so it was this bipartisan attempt to get. He was a New York Times reporter who had exposed some of the NSA spying reporting that was then later confirmed by Edward Snowden's leaks, and they were threatening to put him in prison in order to get him to reveal his sources, and eventually Obama backed off because he was the kind of person that elites could pressure and say, you're a constitutional scholar, bro, you're a law professor, what are you doing? All right, fine. And so he never ended up going to prison. But, Crystal and I both warned, throughout the teens and early 20s that what the left was doing might be constitutional because it's private stuff. You're just you're bullying. The mob is bullying some
private
company to fire a person or get rid of them. But that it was still it was still eroding of the First Amendment. That the First Amendment has a letter and it has a spirit. And while it might not have been violating the letter of it, it was violating the spirit of it. And amendments that are on the books, but that aren't respected by the cultural spirit, aren't worth what they're written on. Look at the Fourth Amendment. No illegal search and seizure. Well, how's that working out for us? It's still written there, but because spiritually we kind of abandon it, then nobody follows it anymore. And so that's why people like Glenn and Crystal and I were all saying, no, you've got to draw the line here and protect it in spirit, not just in letter, because you're not always going to be in power. And in a lot of cases, like Trump was president at the time. And when you fully lose power, look, it's going to ratchet further. The most hopeful thing I've seen, which is probably too hopeful, is that the right is going to have its outrageous spasm of cancel culture. It's going to use the tools and the power of government to censor speech, taking cancel culture to the next level. But it's going to fall apart because the American people, when they vote in elections, a lot of the political science says they're not really actually moved by what the media and what commercials say. Like that's a fraction of how people vote. What they vote on is the underlying material conditions of their lives, which are rapidly deteriorating under Trump. So his effort to do a Turkey, Erdogan, or Hungarian consolidation of the media to hold on to power may not work because we're so federalized and because people vote based on and the Democratic Party is the oldest political party in world history. So people know they don't know what it stands for, but they know it exists. And so if they're not happy with the conditions that they're living in, they know that they can vote for this other party. What is that party going to do? God only knows. They're not telling us.
Right.
But at least they're not the party in power. So that could still happen. And then at that point, maybe both the left and the right are like, okay, we were wrong. Let's do an amnesty and a truce on this cancel culture stuff.
No, I mean,
Okay.
No.
well, let me just say, and we
That's
all
why I said it might be
pretend,
too hopeful. Yeah.
Right. We all pretend cancel culture started with liberals in the Hillary Clinton era, and that's just not true. Think back to the post 2001.
Yeah.
I mean, and go back to McCarthy. Even the early 90s, all the moral panics about rap lyrics and stuff like
Actually,
that.
It was John Adams throwing French-aligned people.
True.
Into prison. John Adams was the
original
worst.
sin.
Yeah.
Original sin
Yeah.
on First Amendment there. I mean,
It actually started with
so,
Jesus.
Yep.
There you go.
Original podcaster.
Yeah.
But I mean, so I have to tell you guys, I don't feel scared or angry. I actually just feel depressed because let's play this out a little bit, okay? And let's keep in mind, you guys, Ryan and Emily, you guys covered this week also this consolidation of media institutions in the hands of Trump-aligned figures and Zionists, the Ellisons, they're so you're going to have CBS, potentially CNN, HBO, Twitter's already owned by Elon, TikTok coming under that umbrella too. So
I've got a breakdown of these, Crystal, for you while you're talking.
Okay,
here.
if you want to throw that up on the screen. And so you talk about Orban. I mean, this is Orban. This is like a speed run of Orbanism, which from my study took longer to consolidate than, this has in the second Trump administration. And then what do you do with the remaining mainstream, establishment institutions? You do what you did with Jimmy Kimmel. You send out the message, listen, you better not cross me or else there are going to be consequences. And the corporate executives, as a leftist, I never expected the capitalists to fight back against fascism, but they certainly aren't rising to the occasion. There's no doubt about that. And so that message goes out too.
You're going to hurt feelings. Don't hurt feelings with the F word.
So that goes out, that goes out too to everybody who works there. They don't have my back. Nobody has solidarity with me. I am just out here on my own. And do I personally have any ability to stand up to the entirety of the United States government? Of course not. And neither does independent, quote unquote, independent media either. If Disney can be crushed like a bug, what do you think we are? Right?
Right.
So you have So that's the media landscape, okay? And then, okay, we have elections, right? We have midterms. We already know Trump is trying to, like, jerry-rig the maps to make it as favorable as possible, cast out on mail-in ballots. They're monkeying around with the voter rolls, like all this stuff that they're going to try to do. Not to mention, we've got National Guard already in the streets in multiple cities. Are they going to be there intimidating voters on Election Day? I don't think it's a crazy thing to suggest. Then, let's say that Democrats overcome that. It's too big to rig. They win a majority in the House. They do well in the Senate, whatever. You think this man is going to accept those election results? Of course he's not. Of course he's not. We already know his playbook. He's already projecting what he's going to do when he's casting doubt on elections and mail-in ballots and saying, I wish we had the recourse of the ballot box, but, the ballot box in many cases is rigged and it's not sufficient. He's going to go out and say, no, these election results are not legitimate. Democrats did not win these seats. They're incapable of winning these seats. And his base will believe him. So at that point, you have a media ecosystem that is completely compromised, that's terrified to tell the truth about the nature of the elections. You've got, roughly half of at least of the voting public that is going along with, his view that this is all rigged and a sham. Like, where are we then? Because the whole thing, to Ryan's point about, it's all written down on paper, but it's as good as the paper it's written on if we don't all sort of, buy into the spirit of the project. The whole thing falls apart if you don't have most of the population sort of routinely just, accepting, okay, these results are more or less correct, and we're going to move forward with what we get. So that's where we're headed. And this media consolidation piece is an important part of it because they need to be scared to tell the truth going, when and if that happens, about what actually occurred. And so that's why I'm feeling very depressed, because I don't see what institution exists or what power structure exists that is capable of rolling back or resisting any of this. It's certainly not the corporations. It hasn't been the universities, wasn't the law firms. Labor has already long been defenestrated long ago. They're irrelevant to the conversation, which is sad and pathetic. The court system, Trump has realized that, number one, there's this loophole in liberal democracy where if you just do a bunch of shit, it takes a while for the courts to catch up. And number two, the Supreme Court's given him everything he wants anyway when it gets there. So, I don't know, guys. That's where we are. It's pretty ugly.
And they're already on Fox News being like, oh, well, the First Amendment, I don't know if Charlie really would have believed in that now. I think Trump said that.
Yeah.
And then someone else on Fox News was like, I don't know if we can deal with the First Amendment anymore. I'm not sure if that's as important as these other things we're dealing with.
Literally what every lib said during the Biden administration that sent conservatives through the roof. Not every lib, of course, but it was all of the disinformation libs who were complaining about the First Amendment scope being too broad and the way that she said the thing that was sending all of the right onto their moral high horse. And again, in a good way, right? We should all be against the government saying, well, maybe that whole First Amendment thing is a little outdated. And
Emily, I'm curious for your take on Crystal's scenario, because it seems pretty dystopian, but also fairly realistic. The only thing I would say could change that arc would be a financial crisis, which we do seem like. I think that's a matter more of when rather than if. That basically just flips the table. But outside of that, where do you see holes in the kind of arc that she sketched out there?
I don't. I don't. I think, for me, it was also depressing when the Hunter Biden laptop case broke, and I saw the way the media had treated the Russia collusion thing for years. And of course, I remember not being able to DM that story after the Politico broke that 51 former intelligence people coming out and saying it had all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. I remember not being able to send it over a DM in private conversations. So that was I felt really similarly then. And I think probably the most important reservation that people should have about Trump, even if you're conservative, even if you are ideologically MAGA, but you're not like full Curtis Yarvin and want just like a monarchy or an American CEO instead of a president. The biggest reservation people should still have is fake claims of fraud in elections, because that is the hallmark of banana republicanism, and we've seen there's precedent for it. So I don't think, like, I actually think a lot of conservatives, if you laid out what Crystal just said, would be like, oh, ha ha. But no, I think it's completely serious because, again, we have precedent for it. So I've got nothing in response to that.
And let me ask you guys something too about this York County shooting of, there was an ambush in Pennsylvania, where 5 cops were ambushed, 3 killed, 2 others wounded. And I'm curious if you think that the climate that we're in explains some of the lack of attention that the media is paying to this. The guy's Matthew Ruth is the killer. He was killed, or he took his own life. There's very little information about this. He was stalking his girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend. She called the police. They suspected an ambush, and still got ambushed from a cornfield. And he's a registered libertarian, I believe. White guy, like it's what people call demographically inconvenient. But even given all those facts, the shooting of 5 police officers and the killing of 3 usually makes national news, even if the shooter is demographically inconvenient. Yet there's barely been a blip. I wonder if the political climate the media is under right now is influencing decisions by broadcasters to say, you know what, let's not touch this. This looks 3 killed, 2 others wounded. Is the hallmark of banana republicanism, and we've seen there's precedent for it. So I don't think, like, I actually think a lot of conservatives, if you laid out what Crystal just said, would be like, oh, ha ha. But no, I think it's completely serious because, again, we have precedent for it. So I've got nothing in response to that. And let me ask you guys something too about this York County shooting of, there was an ambush in Pennsylvania, where 5 cops were ambushed, 3 killed, 2 others wounded. And I'm curious if you think that the climate that we're in explains some of the lack of attention that the media is paying to this. The guy's Matthew Ruth is the killer. He was killed, or he took his own life. There's very little information about this. He was stalking his girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend. She called the police. They suspected an ambush, and still got ambushed from a cornfield.